Latte Haven is sold! That's what Derek shouted across the room, holding a champagne glass, his arm around my mom like they were proud of it. I froze in the doorway, still wearing the apron I stitched myself at 16, just hours after baking 40 cinnamon rolls for our 10-year anniversary. The room clapped. I couldn't breathe. Then, like acid, came his words. "You're just staff, Maya. No say here." And the worst part? Mom didn't defend me. She just looked away, like I wasn't even her daughter. But the pain didn't stop there. 3 weeks later, I learned Dad had left the shop to me in his will. And they both knew it. They thought I'd just smile and pour lattes while they sold my father's dream. But they forgot one thing. Dad gave me a key years ago, and it opens more than just the front door. If you've ever felt betrayed by the ones who should have protected you, drop a "I feel you, Maya" in the comments. Funny how one sentence can set your whole life on fire. 3 years earlier. I'm Maya Thompson, and if you've ever stepped into Latte Haven on a rainy Portland morning, you've probably smelled my childhood. It's not just coffee, it's the scent of warm cinnamon scones fresh from the oven, the hiss of the espresso machine, the sound of raindrops tapping against the shop's big front window. I grew up here, behind these wooden counters worn smooth by years of elbows leaning in for conversation. This place wasn't just a shop, it was our heartbeat. I can still see Mom in her faded blue apron, hair tied back, sliding trays of scones onto the counter with a soft thud. "Stack them high, Maya," she'd say, her voice like the warm light that filled the kitchen. And I would, carefully, almost reverently, because customers would walk in any second, shaking the rain from their coats, smiling at the smell. Dad was the storyteller. Every morning he'd greet regulars by name, swap a joke, and collect their laughter like he was adding cream to the coffee, just enough to make the day better. I'd stand next to him pretending to wipe the counter just so I could listen. There was one story he loved to tell about a customer who accidentally ordered a cappuccino in Italian so badly that Dad gave him a muffin for the effort. The way Dad told it, you'd think it was the highlight of his week. "This place is our heart, Maya," he told me once, his hands resting on the counter like he was holding something fragile and priceless. I believed him completely. Back then, family meant everything, and the shop was the proof of it, built from nothing, run with love, and filled with the faces of people who felt like extended family. But memories can be cruel. They glow so warmly, only to be sliced through by the shadows of what came after. When I was 16, Dad was gone, just like that. A heart attack, sudden and absolute. I remember the smell of coffee still hanging in the air that morning, as if the shop didn't realize the world had stopped. Mom didn't cry in front of me. She threw herself into running Latte Haven, and I did too. It was all we had left of him. 2 years later, she remarried. Derek Collins. He had one of those smiles that made people like him instantly, a quick, easy charm. But there was something about his eyes, calm, calculating, that never sat right with me. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, Mom seemed happy again, and wasn't that what mattered? Still, I noticed things. The way Derek would linger in the office after hours, shutting the door behind him. The way his smile didn't reach his eyes when he thought no one was looking. He didn't meddle much in the early years, but when he did speak about the shop, it was always about efficiency or modernizing, never about people or community like Dad had. And there was this one thing, this strange, slippery memory I couldn't quite catch. I must have been 14, maybe 15. Dad was at the kitchen table one evening, papers spread out in front of him. He looked serious, almost worried. When I asked what he was working on, he smiled faintly and said, "Just making sure the future's safe, kiddo. This shop will always be yours." Then he folded the papers away before I could see more. That memory is like the crack in my favorite coffee mug. Thin, but impossible to ignore. Every time I think about it, I feel that same uneasy flutter in my chest. A will, maybe? I don't know. It's vague, and maybe it's nothing. But sometimes I wonder if it's everything. Life went on. I worked here through high school, through college, learning every corner of this place until I could navigate it with my eyes closed. The smell of roasting beans in the morning, the cool metal of the espresso machine under my fingers, the soft hum of conversation. It was all mine, or at least I thought it was. Now, at 27, Latte Haven is more than a job. It's my inheritance, my lifeline, The last piece of Dad I can touch. I can still hear his voice in my head when I lock up at night. This place is our heart, Maya. And I hold on to that because it's the one thing no one can take from me, or so I believed. But lately, there's been something different in the air. It's subtle, like the moment before a storm when the wind changes direction and you can't explain why you suddenly feel colder. Derek's been spending more time around the shop, making little comments about changes and opportunities. Mom smiles, but it's not the same smile she used to have when Dad was here. And every time I reach for that cracked coffee mug, Dad's old mug, I can't shake the feeling that the crack is a warning. That something's hidden inside this life I thought I knew. I tell myself I'm being dramatic, that I've been watching too many late-night thrillers while closing up the shop. But deep down, I know better. I thought the shop was my future, but that crack in the mug feels like it's hiding something bigger, something I'm not ready to see, but that might already be coming for me. The smell hit me first, warm cinnamon swirled with the sharp, comforting bitterness of freshly ground espresso. It was the scent of Latte Haven, the scent of Dad's legacy, wrapping itself around me like an old blanket. Tonight, the place felt alive in a way that was almost too much. Lanterns bobbed lazily overhead, their golden light pooling over polished tabletops and gleaming mugs. Outside, Portland's drizzle slid down the windows in thin, meandering trails, blurring the neon reflections from across the street. Every tap of raindrops against the glass felt like a small, insistent knock, as if the weather itself wanted in on the celebration. I reached up to hang the final paper lantern above the counter, its delicate frame creaking faintly as it swayed. The light it cast was soft, almost honey-like, catching in the curved glass of the pastry dome and making the cinnamon rolls glow as though they had their own quiet heartbeat. 10 years. 10 years of sweat, laughter, and the quiet hum of early mornings. 10 years of building something that wasn't just a shop. It was a home. The pride swelling in my chest was real, but it was tangled with something else, something tighter, sharper. That's when I spotted Derek. He was in the far corner, half turned away, his frame angled just enough to suggest he didn't want to be noticed. He clutched a dark leather folder tight to his side, knuckles pale around its edges. My mom stood close beside him, leaning in so their heads almost touched, her voice lost beneath the swell of conversation and the soft jazz trickling from the overhead speakers. Derek's lips moved quickly, a blur of words I couldn't catch, and then he did it. That smirk, the same one I'd seen a dozen times before, the one that made me feel like I'd missed the start of a joke that was somehow about me. I crossed the room, rubbing my hands on my apron, masking my unease with a smile. "What's in the folder?" I asked, aiming for casual, teasing even. "Just some plans," he said, his gaze slipping past me toward the entrance. "Thinking of upgrading the shop. Fresh start, you know." "Upgrading?" My voice caught slightly. "Like renovations?" The smirk deepened, but no words followed. Mom's hands went busy straightening a stack of menus that didn't need straightening, her eyes fixed on them like they were suddenly the most important thing in the world. She didn't even greet me. My stomach tightened. For the next hour, I moved like clockwork, pouring refills, laughing with customers, snapping pictures of regulars under the lantern light. But no matter where I was, I could feel the pull of that corner. The folder stayed by Derek's side, never once set down, his thumb tapping idly on its leather surface. Mom's laugh rang out occasionally, but it never reached her eyes. When the crowd thinned, I slipped into the storage room under the pretense of grabbing more cups. The air was cooler here, tinged with the earthy scent of roasted beans and the faint must of old cardboard. A low hum from the fridge filled the space like a steady heartbeat. Reaching for a sleeve of cups, my fingers brushed something rough shoved behind a stack of bulk sugar bags. I crouched and pulled it free, a dusty cardboard box with tape browned and brittle at the edges. Dust puffed into the air, scratching at my throat. I pried it open, pushing aside a stack of outdated flyers until something thin slid into my lap. A single sheet of paper, its edges curled inward, the surface slightly warped as though it had been damp at some point. My chest tightened before I even read it. Dad's handwriting. It was instantly familiar. Slanted letters, uneven spacing, a kind of hurried care, like he'd been racing the clock but still wanted each word to mean something. The first line stopped me cold. Sole ownership belongs to... My breath hitched, eyes darting over the rest. But the middle section was a blur, the ink smeared into soft gray streaks that refused to take shape. Water damage, maybe. Or time. I tilted it under the weak bulb overhead, squinting, but the missing words wouldn't return. My thumb traced the letters as though my skin might coax them back. Sole ownership. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Ownership of what? The shop? And why hide this in the back of a dusty box instead of telling me outright? The storage door creaked and I nearly jumped, stuffing the paper into my apron pocket. Joe, a regular with a chipped blue mug permanently in hand, stood in the doorway. His brow furrowed slightly. "Your mom's acting off today, Maya," he said, voice low. I forced a laugh. "You think so?" He nodded, glancing toward the cafe. "She's avoiding people, especially you." Without another word, he took a slow sip and walked away, leaving his observation to fester. Leaning back against the shelf, I felt the folded paper pressing into my side, its presence somehow heavier than the box it came from. Mom avoiding me. Derek guarding a mysterious folder. Dad's words, partially gone, but the part that remained lodged like a splinter. When I returned to the cafe, the air felt different. The laughter, the clink of spoons against mugs, even the music. It all seemed muted, like I was hearing it from behind glass. My eyes swept the room instinctively. Derek caught my gaze, and for the briefest moment, I saw the ghost of that smirk again, curling just enough to make my pulse jump. I turned toward Mom, searching for some kind of reassurance. Her back was straight, movements brisk as she arranged pastries on a tray. Too brisk. Her hands didn't falter, but they moved with a speed that didn't match the calm she was trying to project. She didn't look up. And standing there, under the glow of the lanterns we'd hung together, one thought pressed harder than the rest. Was Dad trying to tell me something? Or warn me? The chatter, laughter, and clinking of cups filled Latte Haven like a familiar, comforting rhythm, but tonight it pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Lanterns swayed gently above the tables, their soft golden glow casting flickering shadows that danced across the faces of our guests, some smiling, some unaware of the storm about to hit. Outside, Portland's drizzle tapped a steady rhythm against the windows, a muted percussion that only amplified the tension crawling up my spine. The scent of espresso and cinnamon, usually a balm, now seemed sharp, almost bitter, mingling with the faint undertone of pastry sugar in the warm, crowded air. I moved between tables, refilling mugs, balancing trays, and offering smiles that felt increasingly hollow. My hands trembled slightly despite the firm grip of my apron, my chest tightening as my gaze kept flicking toward Derek. He had been unnaturally quiet all evening. The dark leather folder he'd been clutching earlier now resting innocuously on the corner table like a coiled threat. Mom hovered nearby, arranging pastries and menus with mechanical precision, her eyes darting anywhere but toward me. A subtle, creeping unease gnawed at my gut, whispering that something was terribly off. Then, in a heartbeat, Derek rose. The room seemed to pause, the hum of conversation dimming as if sensing the shift. Phones lifted instinctively, flashes capturing the moment, a digital echo of the tension spreading through the space. Even the gentle hiss of the espresso machine in the back seemed amplified, a metallic undertone to the looming confrontation. Derek straightened, shoulders squared, clearing his throat with deliberate slowness, and the smirk on his face, confident, self-satisfied, almost cruel, cut across the warm ambiance like a knife. "I have an announcement," he said, voice deceptively calm, but each word struck like ice. "Latte Haven is being sold." The words hit me with a force that made my stomach lurch. The tray of pastries in my hands wobbled, threatening to spill, as if the universe itself had tilted beneath my feet. I felt my breath catch, the comforting aroma of coffee turning acrid in my mouth. My eyes scanned the room, customers frozen mid-laughter, whispers spreading like wildfire, some raising phones to capture this impossible moment. The soft golden light of the lanterns suddenly felt harsh, spotlighting my disbelief, highlighting every inch of my exposed shock. "What?" I managed to gasp, my voice trembling. "Why? This is Dad's shop, our family's, our life." Each word clawed its way out, raw and desperate, yet weak against the charged silence. Derek's gaze was unwavering, his smirk widening slightly. "Early retirement, Maya. Time to enjoy life without running a coffee shop that's grown too sentimental." My knees threatened to buckle. "This isn't yours to decide," I shouted, my voice breaking as the weight of betrayal pressed down on me. "The shop is Dad's legacy. Everything he built, everything we've poured our hearts into, can't just be handed over to some corporate chain." The murmurs around me grew louder, flashes continued, and the festive atmosphere teetered on the edge of chaos. Derek leaned back slightly, crossing his arms with an air of smug finality, and then delivered the words that made my chest seize. "You're just staff, Maya. No say here." The phrase carved into me, leaving a hollow ache. I staggered back, my fingertips brushing the edge of a table, grounding me against the dizzying shock. Mom, calm and serene to anyone else, nodded in subtle agreement. "It's a better future," she murmured, her eyes deliberately avoiding mine, and the ground beneath me seemed to vanish. The family I trusted, the shop I loved, the very heart of my world, all felt like they had turned to dust in an instant. I tried to speak, to argue, to claw back some piece of the reality I had known, but my voice faltered, strangled by disbelief and hurt. Phone cameras flashed repeatedly, immortalizing my humiliation in bright bursts. Derek's smirk was relentless, almost theatrical, while Mom's quiet complicity pressed down on me like a physical weight. The betrayal wasn't just about selling the shop. It was in the choice, in her alignment with him over me, over everything Dad had cherished. I gripped the polished wood edge of a nearby counter, the grain rough under my trembling fingers, grounding me as my mind raced. Every instinct screamed at me to stop him, to snatch that folder, to defend our legacy, but I was exposed, isolated, the crowd a silent jury to the unthinkable. The clatter of cups, murmurs of shock, shuffling of hesitant feet, all became a distorted soundtrack to my anguish. Anger, disbelief, and hurt collided in my chest. How could Mom do this? Stand beside him, nodding quietly, when she knew what this shop meant to me, to Dad, to our family. Derek. He had orchestrated this flawlessly, ensuring my outrage would be public, witnessed, recorded, consumed by everyone here. I drew in a shuddering breath, the warm scent of espresso and cinnamon mingling with the metallic tang of betrayal. My eyes roamed the lantern-lit room, taking in the shocked faces, the phones capturing every nuance, and amid the chaos, a flicker of determination ignited deep in my chest. This wasn't the end. If the people I trusted, Mom, Derek, had turned against me, I would have to rely on myself. Dad's legacy, our family's heart, wasn't theirs to give away. Clenching my fists, I felt the heat of resolve surge through me, a promise to fight back, to reclaim what was mine. The question that consumed me now burned hotter than any anger. How do I save what's ours before it's too late? The shop was silent now, a hushed contrast to the chaos of the anniversary. Lanterns hung dimly, their soft golden light barely reaching the far corners, and outside, Portland's drizzle whispered against the windows, a rhythm that seemed almost conspiratorial in the quiet night. I stepped carefully across the wooden floor, every creak magnified in the stillness, my heart still racing from the betrayal earlier. The air smelled faintly of coffee and aged paper, a mixture that somehow anchored me even as my mind spun. I pushed open the door to the storage room, the hinges groaning softly. Dust motes floated in the lantern light, dancing in lazy spirals above boxes stacked haphazardly to the ceiling. The room smelled thickly of old cardboard, roasting residue, and the faint trace of sugar from long-forgotten pastries. My hands trembled as I began rifling through the boxes, pushing aside envelopes, brittle receipts, and decades of forgotten shop memorabilia. Each paper I touched seemed heavier than the last, laden with history, with memories of Dad, with fragments of a life I thought I understood. Then, something slid out from between a stack of old flyers. I bent down quickly, brushing the dust away, and saw a photo, me and Dad by the old roaster, both of us smiling, the steam curling around us like a living memory. And there, scrawled in his unmistakable handwriting across the bottom, were the words, "For Maya, forever." My fingers froze over the photo, the edges rough beneath my fingertips, my chest swelling with a mix of sorrow and fire. Fury at Derek, shock at Mom, and a deep, fierce love for my father all collided in a single, unrelenting pulse. I pressed the photo to my chest, inhaling sharply, the scent of old paper mingling with the faint aroma of espresso. He had left me something. He had known this moment could come, that someone might try to take the shop. And yet he had left a thread, a promise, a clue. I couldn't let them erase him, erase everything he had built. I couldn't stand by. Fumbling in my pocket, I pulled out my phone and dialed Riley, Dad's old lawyer. The phone rang, each tone slicing through the quiet of the night, echoing off the bare walls of the storage room. I counted the rings, each one hammering urgency into my chest, until finally she picked up. "Maya?" Riley's voice was low, cautious, almost hesitant. "It's late. I don't care," I snapped, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to know about the will, now." There was a pause, a faint shuffling on the other end. I can check it, Maya, but be careful. Things are complicated. You don't want to rush into—" "I don't have time," I cut in, gripping the edges of a nearby box, feeling the rough cardboard bite into my palms. "I know Dad left me something. I can feel it. I won't let them take it from me. Not Derek, not Mom, no one." Her sigh was soft, tinged with worry. "All right, I'll look into it, but don't do anything reckless." I hung up, my hands still clutching the photo as I sank onto the floor amidst the scattered boxes. The words, "For Maya forever," burned in my mind like a beacon, illuminating a path through the shadows of betrayal that surrounded me. Every fiber of my being thrummed with determination. I would find out what Dad had left me, and I would claim it. The shop, his legacy, our family's heart. No one could take that from me if I had anything to say about it. I leaned back against the rough wall, letting the silence of the shop settle around me, but my thoughts raced faster than ever. What exactly had Dad left? Why hadn't he told me directly? And why did it feel like someone was already trying to bury it, to erase his intentions before I even had the chance to uncover them? Questions clawed at me, but beneath the fear and confusion, a solid, unyielding resolve began to form. I would uncover the truth. I would protect what was mine. The storage room was dark now, the lantern light throwing faint, uneven patterns across the stacks of boxes and shelves. My fingers traced the edges of the photo again, smoothing over Dad's handwriting. It was more than a picture. It was a challenge, a promise, a spark that ignited a fire in my chest. I would dig through every hidden corner, sift through every forgotten box, every old document, until I found what he left for me. I would not be idle. I would not be powerless. Outside, the rain continued its soft patter, a lullaby for a city asleep but oblivious to the storm brewing in a small, cluttered storage room. I gathered my resolve like a cloak around me, standing and straightening my shoulders. This was the moment where hesitation ended and action began. I would find the truth about Dad's will, and I would make sure his legacy survived, no matter the cost. The path ahead was uncertain, darkened by betrayal and hidden intentions, but I had a clue, a guide, a piece of Dad himself, and that was enough to start the fight. Clutching the photo tightly, I took a deep breath, letting the familiar sense of coffee and aged paper fill my lungs. The night was quiet, but my mind was alive, buzzing with plans and possibilities. Every step I took, every box I moved, every memory I unearthed would bring me closer to what Dad had left me, and nothing, no Derek, no Mom, no obstacle, would stop me from claiming it. The truth was waiting, hidden somewhere in the shadows, and I was ready to reach for it. The night outside the shop pressed softly against the windows, rain tracing thin silver paths down the glass, while inside, the lingering scent of roasted coffee and old paper clung stubbornly to every corner. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the storage room, photo in one hand, and my fingers instinctively brushed against the small, cold object in my pocket. The key Dad had given me years ago. It was worn, the brass dulled by time, but its edges still held the faint warmth of his hands. Memories flooded me, vivid as if the summer air itself had been bottled and released. I was 15, the shop quieter then, the air heavy with roasted beans and the earthy scent of Portland summer. Dad had pulled me behind the shop, just past the alley, where the old roaster hummed steadily. The sky was tinged with gold and violet, a fading dusk that made everything feel suspended between day and night, possibility and reality. I remembered his hand on my shoulder, firm but gentle, guiding me closer to the machine that had become the heartbeat of our little family. "You'll keep this place alive, Maya," he said, his voice soft but carrying that unmistakable authority, the kind that made you believe every word. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small key, the metal cool against my palm. "Keep this safe," he added, his smile heavy with a sadness I didn't understand at the time. Back then, I thought it was just encouragement, a symbol of trust, a father passing a mantle. I slipped it into my own pocket, tucking it close to my heart without asking what it opened. I trusted him, and at 15, that was enough. Now, years later, holding it again, the weight felt different. It wasn't just a token, it was a puzzle, a secret he had left behind, maybe knowing the storms that would come. I thought of Derek, the way his brow had furrowed the last time he saw me holding it, a fleeting flash of unease crossing his otherwise composed face. At the time, I dismissed it. He was just competitive, protective of the shop in his own twisted way, but now it gnawed at me. What did he know? What had Dad been protecting me from? I closed my eyes and let the memory deepen. The summer breeze had carried the faint scent of lilacs from the neighbor's garden, mingling with the smokiness of the roaster, a smell that had always felt like home. I remembered the way the metal of the key had been warm in my hand, the way Dad had looked at me, not with expectation, but with faith, as if he were entrusting me with something far greater than a coffee shop. "You'll keep this place alive, Maya," his words repeated in my mind like a mantra, filling me with both a pang of loss and a spark of hope. I opened my eyes, the dim storage room now illuminated only by the muted glow of the lanterns and the faint reflection of streetlights outside. The key felt heavier than it had in years, a talisman that linked me to Dad's trust and to the secrets he had kept hidden. I traced its edges, imagining all the doors it might unlock, doors to safety, doors to his will, doors to answers I hadn't even begun to seek. Every memory of him, every summer dusk, every lesson in the hum of the roaster now seemed like breadcrumbs, leading me towards something I had to uncover. Loss and hope collided in my chest. The betrayal earlier by Derek and Mom had left me raw, but the key reminded me that Dad had never left me powerless. He had left me a choice, a tool, a secret wrapped in trust. What had he been safeguarding with this small piece of brass? And why now, when the shop, his legacy, and my family were all teetering on the edge of loss, did it feel like the key had a purpose I couldn't ignore? I rose to my feet, the photo and key clutched tightly in my hands, and walked toward the corner where the storage boxes were stacked. The night outside pressed against the walls, quiet and expectant, and the hum of the city felt distant, like the world itself had paused, waiting for me to act. My fingers tightened around the key. I could almost feel Dad's presence, guiding me, urging me to uncover the truth, to protect what was his, what was ours. The more I held it, the more determined I became. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was a call to action. Whatever secrets the key guarded, whatever path Dad had anticipated, I had to follow it. I would find out what it opened. I would honor his trust. And I would make sure his legacy survived, no matter how much Derek or anyone else tried to erase it. A soft gust of wind rattled the window pane, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and the city at night. It felt like the world whispering possibilities, like the key itself was alive in my palm, waiting for me to discover its purpose. My thoughts raced ahead, imagining locked cabinets, hidden compartments, maybe even a safe, everything Dad might have left to secure his intentions, his love, his final instructions. I pressed the key into my palm, feeling its contours, its ridges, the cold solidity of its promise. It was more than metal. It was a tether to Dad, a reminder that even in the midst of betrayal, of fear, of loss, I still had a lifeline, and I would use it. I would unlock whatever he had safeguarded. I would uncover the truth, step by step, until the secrets he left behind were mine to wield, and the legacy he entrusted to me was preserved. The night deepened, wrapping the shop in shadows, but my resolve burned bright. The photo, the key, the memory of Dad's eyes and words, they were enough to light a path through the darkness. And as I held them close, I made a silent vow. I would find the answers. I would honor him, and I would keep this place alive, just as he had always believed I could. The office smelled of old leather and polished wood, a quiet kind of dignity that made the hum of Portland traffic outside feel distant, almost intrusive. I sat stiffly in the chair across from Riley, my hands gripping the edges, as if letting go would make the moment vanish. The dim light from the desk lamp cast long shadows across the stacks of legal files, the pages whispering secrets that had been kept from me for far too long. My pulse throbbed in my ears, the memory of Derek's announcement at Latte Haven still raw, still burning. Riley slid a folder across the mahogany desk, her fingers brushing mine for a brief, tentative moment. "Here," she said, her voice steady but tinged with hesitation. "This is your father's will." The folder felt heavier than I expected, weighty with both paper and revelation. My fingers trembled as I opened it, the rustle of pages sounding louder than it should, as if the office itself was holding its breath with me. The words on the page were clear, deliberate, and utterly liberating. Dad had left me 60% ownership of Latte Haven, held in trust until my 30th birthday. Derek and Mom were listed only as managers, entrusted with running the shop day to day, but they had no right to sell it. I felt a rush, a warmth spreading through my chest, like Dad himself had wrapped me in an invisible embrace, letting me know he had always believed in me. And yet, the warmth was poisoned by a slow, searing rage. How could Mom have known this all along and never told me? How many times had I been blindsided, humiliated in front of customers, standing as if powerless, when all along the truth had been sitting quietly in someone's drawer? My fingers tightened around the edges of the folder, knuckles white. The betrayal cut deeper than Derek's announcement ever could. Riley leaned back slightly, watching me, her brow furrowed with concern. "Derek tried to change it, Maya," she said softly, almost apologetically. "He couldn't. Legally, it was ironclad. Your father made sure of it." Her words were meant to comfort, to reassure, but they also fanned the flames of my fury. Derek had attempted to steal what was rightfully mine and Mom. Mom had allowed it, silently complicit, letting me endure the shock, the humiliation, without so much as a hint. I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of tears I refused to shed. The betrayal wasn't just the attempted sale. It was the pattern, the choice, the duplicity. Every decision they had made to exclude me now revealed a second layer of treachery. Mom's quiet compliance during the party, her nod when Derek declared the shop for sale, it all made sense in the most infuriating way. She had known all along and said nothing. How could she do this? How could she betray Dad's trust and mine in one fell swoop? The office felt suddenly smaller, the walls pressing in, lined with legal books that had always seemed intimidating but now felt like silent witnesses to the injustice I had suffered. I ran my fingers over the folder again, feeling the embossed letters of the legal seal beneath my touch, and a spark of empowerment ignited. This was mine. Dad had left it to me. No one could take it, not legally, not without consequences. "Riley," I said, my voice low but firm. "Why would Mom hide this from me? Why didn't she say anything?" My words hung in the air, heavy with accusation and disbelief. Riley hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. I don't know, Maya," she admitted. "Sometimes people think they're protecting you or protecting the family. But Derek, he definitely tried to override it. He came close to making it stick, but your father's provisions were unbreakable." I exhaled slowly, letting the anger simmer into a boiling determination. My heart raced, mind spinning through scenarios, possibilities, confrontations. If Derek and Mom had gone this far, what else were they hiding? What other secrets, other attempts to undermine me, had been kept from view? The notion of complacency turned into a spark of resolve. I wouldn't let them dictate my father's legacy. I wouldn't let them rewrite history or steal the future he had intended for me. The light from the desk lamp reflected off the mahogany surface, illuminating the fine lines on Riley's face. the careful way she handled my father's documents. Each page I had touched seemed to pulse with significance, each clause a reminder that my father had planned, had protected, had trusted me to reclaim what was mine. The betrayal of the previous night was now tempered with a new clarity. I had the authority, the right, and the responsibility to act. I clutched the folder to my chest, feeling both the weight of ownership and the simmering fire of indignation. Portland's night outside had deepened into silence, the urban hum muted against the quiet determination building within me. I could almost hear Dad's voice whispering in memory, reminding me that power and responsibility often came hand in hand, that those who acted with courage could reclaim what was lost. My mind replayed Derek's smirk, Mom's serene compliance, the flash of cameras capturing my shock. All of it, every humiliation, every doubt, every moment I had felt powerless, was now fuel for the next step. The law was on my side, and Dad had ensured it. I wasn't just the staff, I wasn't just a bystander. I was the rightful owner, and I would act accordingly. I rose from the chair, the folder tucked firmly under my arm, and took a deep breath. The room, the office, the quiet authority of Riley's presence, all of it faded into the background as I envisioned confronting Derek, reclaiming my shop, and unveiling the truths Mom had tried to bury. The anger that had once seemed like a burning pit now sharpened into clarity, precision, purpose. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was planning. And yet, as I stared out the window at the glimmering city lights, a question gnawed at the edges of my determination. If Derek and Mom had gone this far, how deep did their deception run? What else had they hidden from me, from Dad, from everyone who believed in this shop as more than just a business? The answers were out there, waiting, and I knew I had to uncover them. Holding the folder, feeling the solid weight of both legal power and paternal trust, I felt a shift inside me. The helplessness of the past nights was gone, replaced by resolve, by clarity, and by an unwavering determination to claim my birthright and unearth every secret they had hoped to keep buried. Dad had entrusted me with Latte Haven, and now I had the tools, the authority, and the fire to protect it. The night outside deepened further. The city's murmur softened into a quiet backdrop for the storm of plans and confrontations brewing within me. I drew in a steadying breath, feeling both fear and empowerment coiling together, ready to propel me into the battles ahead. Whatever Derek had tried, whatever Mom had hidden, I was ready. I would not be denied. I would uncover the truth. I would claim what was mine. The shop was cloaked in darkness, the quiet hum of the espresso machine long silenced, chairs stacked on tables casting long angular shadows across the polished floor. The faint aroma of roasted beans lingered in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of cleaning supplies, a scent that felt both comforting and haunting in the stillness. My heart pounded in rhythm with my careful footsteps as I crept toward the office, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a shout in the silence. Portland's night outside pressed against the windows, a quiet partner to my clandestine mission. The computer sat innocuous on the desk, its black screen reflecting the dim glow of a single overhead lamp. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for a fraction of a second before typing what I hoped was the key: Derek and Mom's wedding date. The screen flickered, then lit up, revealing the desktop. Relief and adrenaline surged simultaneously. I had bypassed his first line of defense. I dove into his email, scrolling through the message threads, the glow of the monitor painting my face in stark, icy light. My eyes widened as I found the first damning piece of evidence. A deposit had been taken, funds clearly intended for the shop's sale. But then there was another more cryptic line, a mention of an offshore loan, tucked casually into one of the messages as if it were ordinary business. My pulse spiked. What had Derek done with the money? How deep did this go? And most unsettling of all, did Mom know? I quickly started taking screenshots, the clicks of the mouse feeling deafening in the quiet office. Each image felt like a small victory, a weapon against the deception, but also a revelation that shook the foundations of everything I thought I knew. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of uncovering truths that had been hidden from me for too long. The screen's glow highlighted the beads of sweat on my forehead and the tension in my jaw as I captured every line, every figure, every cryptic hint that might later hold answers. Suddenly, a soft shuffle from the corner of the room made me freeze, my breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I whispered, heart hammering in my chest. A familiar face emerged from the shadows. It was Joe, one of our regulars, the quiet guy who always lingered near the back, watching more than he let on. His eyes darted nervously toward the computer. I saw Derek with shady guys here last week," he murmured, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Something about money. Didn't seem right." The words hit me like a thunderclap. Derek wasn't just planning to sell the shop. He was moving money behind the scenes, possibly diverting Dad's legacy into channels I couldn't even imagine. And Joe's observation hinted that Mom's knowledge, or at least her silence, might be part of the puzzle. My stomach turned over. Could she really be complicit? Had she been watching this all unfold without telling me, letting Derek manipulate our father's dream while I scrambled helplessly? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. The shadows of the office seemed to press closer, the faint hum of the computer fan now sounding like a metronome, counting down to disaster. I could almost feel Dad's presence in the shop, silent and disappointed, and it sharpened my resolve. This wasn't just about ownership anymore. It was about uncovering the full truth, about protecting the integrity of everything Dad had built. Joe shifted slightly, as if sensing my tension, and added, "Be careful, Maya. Whatever's happening here, it's bigger than you think." His warning hung in the air, heavy and urgent, and I realized he was right. Derek's deception wasn't limited to words or threats. It involved money, secret dealings, and now, perhaps, Mom's quiet complicity. Every click of the mouse, every screenshot I captured, became a small act of rebellion, a way to reclaim a piece of control in a situation that had left me feeling powerless for too long. I leaned closer to the monitor, scanning each email for clues, the glow reflecting in my wide, determined eyes. One thread mentioned a transfer date, another hinted at offshore accounts, and yet another contained the sort of casual language only someone confident in their impunity would use. Derek had been thorough, methodical even, and it was clear he hadn't anticipated me digging into his files. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and exhilaration. "What were you doing back here?" Joe whispered again, more insistently this time, though not accusingly. I shook my head quickly, not wanting to draw unnecessary attention to our quiet investigation. "Just checking some files. Needed to make sure everything's in order," I murmured, though the truth was far darker, far more urgent than my casual words suggested. Joe nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on the glowing monitor, then back at me. "Just watch your back," he said, stepping back into the shadows. "Derek's not the only one who's clever around here." Alone again, I leaned back in the chair, the weight of discovery settling on my shoulders. The emails, the deposit, the offshore mention, they were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed. I could feel Dad's spirit guiding me, urging me to dig deeper, to uncover every hidden corner of deception that threatened his legacy. Each screenshot saved was a step closer to truth, and each revelation steeled my resolve. The quiet of the shop pressed around me once more, the night beyond the windows still and expectant. I realized that what I had uncovered was only the beginning. Derek's financial maneuverings, Joe's whispered warnings, Mom's silence, they were threads leading to a much larger tapestry of betrayal. And if I wanted to protect Latte Haven, if I wanted to honor Dad's vision, I had no choice but to follow them to the very end. My hands lingered over the keyboard, the soft glow illuminating my determined expression. The shadows of the office seemed to shrink as my focus sharpened, each keystroke a declaration. I would not be blindsided again. Derek's actions, Mom's hidden knowledge, the mystery of Dad's dreams, all of it would be confronted, dissected, and brought into the light. And with every screenshot, every piece of evidence captured, I felt closer to uncovering the truth that had been kept from me for too long. I stood, taking one last glance at the computer screen, the emails glowing like unspoken confessions. Portland's streets outside were quiet, the night's stillness a stark contrast to the storm building within me. My pulse thrummed with urgency, my mind racing with plans, questions, and the undeniable drive to act. Derek had crossed a line, Mom had hidden the truth, and now it was my turn to confront the shadows they had cast over my father's legacy. One thought pulsed insistently through my mind as I turned off the monitor and tucked my phone into my pocket. Whatever Derek had done, whatever Mom had known, the answers were out there, and I would find them. No more silence, no more hidden deals. The time to uncover the full story had come. The shop smelled of damp wood and roasted coffee, the dim light from the hanging bulbs casting long shadows over the tables. Rain drummed steadily against the windows, a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I hadn't expected anyone to be here after closing, yet there they were. Derek leaning casually against the counter, a folded contract in his hands, Mom standing behind him, silent, her eyes red and glistening under the faint light. My stomach churned before I even spoke. "Sign it, Maya, or the bank takes everything," Derek said, voice smooth, almost rehearsed, as if he had delivered this line 100 times before. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and I could feel the weight of his threat pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. I noticed the corners of Mom's lips twitch, the hesitation in her stance, but she said nothing. Her silence screamed volumes. She was with him, against me. I took a step forward, hands trembling but resolve hardening with every heartbeat. My eyes fell on the contract, the legal paper trembling slightly in Derek's grip. He had mortgaged the shop, the very place Dad had poured his soul into, to secure a personal loan. Every word on that page felt like a betrayal carved into my chest. I swallowed hard, feeling a hot surge of anger rise from my core. "This is Dad's shop, not yours," I shouted, the words echoing across the empty room. The sound of my voice seemed to break something in the air, scattering the quiet like a storm. I grabbed the nearest coffee mug, the porcelain cool against my palm, and hurled it against the wall. The crash was deafening, shards scattering across the worn floorboards. My chest heaved, adrenaline fueling my defiance, my eyes blazing with a mixture of grief and fury. Derek's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly masked it with an annoyed glare. "You don't understand, Maya," he said, stepping closer, the contract still extended like a weapon. "This is business. I'm saving what we can." But I didn't flinch. Every fiber of my being resisted him. Every memory of Dad's laughter, his pride in the shop, reinforced my stand. I took another step forward, the rain outside now hammering harder against the glass, the dim light flickering across my determined face. "No, I won't let you touch it," I said firmly. "You think a piece of paper can erase my father's life's work? Think again." My voice shook, not from fear, but from the raw intensity of holding back everything I felt: rage, sorrow, betrayal. Mom's eyes met mine briefly, and I saw it there. A flicker of regret, quickly masked, buried under layers of allegiance to Derek. The third betrayal cut deeper than any before. My own mother enabling the fraud, standing silently while my father's legacy was threatened. My chest tightened, the room spinning slightly as the betrayal sank into me. But I didn't falter. Derek's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the contract. "You're making a mistake," he hissed, venom barely contained. "Do you know what this will cost you?" His voice was low, threatening, but I could see through the mask. Fear had never protected the shop. Dad had built it on courage and care, and now it was my turn to defend it. I stepped closer, close enough to feel the tension radiating off him. "You already made your mistake the moment you thought you could take what isn't yours," I said, voice rising with certainty. "This shop isn't a game, Derek, and it isn't yours to gamble with." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, heavy with truth. Mom shifted uncomfortably behind him, glancing down at the floor. I felt a pang of sorrow pierce my anger. Couldn't she see what he had done? Couldn't she understand the weight of this betrayal? I realized, with a sharp sting, that her silence made her complicit, that she had chosen him over me, over Dad. My hands shook slightly, not with fear, but with heartbreak that coursed through my veins like ice. Without another word, I stepped aside, grabbed the contract from Derek's hand with a swift motion, and tore it in half. The paper crumpled and fell to the floor in jagged pieces, the sound echoing like a bell of defiance. "I will not be your pawn," I said, staring him down, every syllable sharp, every movement fueled by a storm of grief and fury. "This is Dad's shop. You don't get to decide its fate." Derek recoiled slightly, his eyes dark, and for a moment I saw the man behind the facade. Frustration, anger, and perhaps fear that his control was slipping. Mom's shoulders slumped and she stepped back, her silence now deafening, a quiet admission of her betrayal. The weight of it hit me fully. They had underestimated me, underestimated the bond I had with Dad, underestimated my refusal to surrender. I turned to the door, motioning sharply. "Get out, both of you. Leave this place," I demanded, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. The rain outside pounded like a drum, the dim shop lights casting long shadows behind them as they hesitated. Then slowly, begrudgingly, they obeyed. Derek shot me one last glare, his lips tight, before he backed out into the night, Mom following silently. The door closed with a definitive click, leaving me alone amidst the echoes of shattered porcelain and the heavy scent of coffee. I sank onto a chair, gripping the edge of the table, the adrenaline ebbing and leaving a raw ache in its place. My heart still raced, but now it was tinged with a bitter sort of triumph. The shop was mine, still standing, still breathing, and for the first time that night, I felt a spark of control, a spark of justice. But the pain lingered. Mom had chosen him, and the betrayal stung sharper than any threat or lie. I looked around at the scattered shards, the dim glow of the lights reflecting off the floor, and whispered to myself, "Mom chose him over me, over Dad. I'm done being their pawn." The words felt like a shield, a declaration of independence and defiance. I had defended the shop, yes, but the emotional wound remained, a stark reminder that betrayal could come from the most unexpected places. Rain continued to fall outside, the night pressing against the windows with relentless insistence. I rose slowly, straightened my back, and breathed in the familiar, comforting aroma of coffee, letting it ground me. This shop, Dad's dream, my responsibility, it was safe for now. And yet the emotional devastation lingered, a fuel for the battles ahead, a reminder that some betrayals left marks deeper than any legal claim could heal. The evening air was heavy as I walked up the familiar path to Mom's house. The sun had dipped behind Portland's gray clouds, casting long shadows over the neat suburban lawns, the faint scent of rain mingling with the lingering aroma of cut grass. The cozy warmth of the house, once comforting, felt almost oppressive now, like it was holding secrets behind its closed doors. My hands trembled slightly as I raised them to knock, and before I could, the door creaked open. Mom stood there, her hair slightly mussed, eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. "Maya," she began, her voice shaky, brittle like glass threatening to shatter. I just wanted what's best." She swallowed, looking at me with an expression I could barely decipher. Was it guilt? Regret? Or the faintest hope that I'd forgive her? I couldn't tell. My chest tightened, a painful mix of anger and sorrow knotting deep inside me. I stepped inside, the familiar smell of cinnamon and vanilla wafting from the kitchen, but it didn't bring comfort. Instead, it reminded me of every evening I'd spent here as a child, every memory now tainted by the knowledge of what she'd allowed. My gaze fell to the floorboards, noticing the faint scuff marks, the tiny dents, details I had never cared about before but now seemed to echo betrayal in their silence. "She knew," my inner voice whispered, a bitter sting threading through each word. She knew Derek had mortgaged the shop. She knew he was gambling with Dad's legacy, and she had chosen silence, choosing to keep peace over honesty. My fingers clenched into fists at my sides, nails biting into my palms. The warmth of this home couldn't thaw the cold truth settling in my chest. "I stayed quiet to keep peace," Mom admitted, voice breaking halfway, as if the confession itself pained her. She stepped closer, reaching out as if to bridge the chasm that now yawned between us. "I thought it would protect you, protect us." Her words hit me like a slap. The very notion of protection twisted into betrayal. I shook my head, stepping back, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I'm not your daughter anymore," I said quietly, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. They weren't meant to wound, though perhaps they did. They were meant to sever the invisible thread that had once connected us. She flinched, as if expecting me to collapse in grief or rage, but I stayed upright, my resolve hardening with every heartbeat. Mom's hands dropped to her sides, and for a moment she looked small, almost childlike, standing in the middle of her own living room, surrounded by familiar furniture and framed photographs. None of it mattered now. Not the warm light of the lamps, not the cozy armchair, not the little trinkets on the mantel. All that mattered was the truth, stark and cold. She had betrayed me. She had enabled Derek. She had chosen him over Dad, over me, over everything I held sacred. I turned toward the door, each step deliberate, echoing in the quiet house. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel, a path away from the life I thought I had here, away from the mother I no longer recognized. The doorknob was cold under my fingers, grounding me, anchoring me to reality, to the fight I now had to carry alone. As I stepped outside, the rain began again, light at first, then heavier, soaking through my jacket, clinging to my hair. It was cleansing in a strange way, washing away the remnants of false comfort, leaving only clarity behind. The heartbreak was sharp, gnawing at my ribs, but beneath it simmered determination. Derek had tried to take what was mine. Mom had silently allowed it, and I would not let them succeed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting some trivial notification, but it was Joe. His message blinked on the screen. "That shop's yours, kid. Don't give up." I stared at the words, the screen's glow illuminating my face in the rainy dusk. A small smile tugged at my lips, faint but real. Even in the depths of betrayal, even when Mom had turned her back, I wasn't completely alone. Joe's belief in me was a lifeline, a reminder that some people still honored Dad's dream as much as I did. I typed a quick reply, fingers shaky but steady. "Thanks, Joe. I won't." And in that simple act, I felt a spark of defiance, a seed of courage taking root. The heartbreak remained, gnawing at me like a persistent ache, but it fueled something stronger now, resolve. The fight wasn't just about the shop anymore. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been stolen, about honoring Dad's legacy and proving that no betrayal, no matter how deep, could break me. The street was slick and reflective from the rain, Portland's evening gloom stretching endlessly. The faint hum of traffic and distant footsteps echoed around me, but they couldn't drown out the thoughts circling in my mind. Strategies, risks, possibilities. I clenched the key Dad had given me years ago, feeling its cool weight against my palm. That key, the shop, the evidence I had gathered, they were all pieces of the puzzle, waiting for the right moment to bring the truth into the light. I walked faster now, the rain soaking through my coat, each step a drumbeat of determination. Mom's apology had fallen hollow, her words empty against the depth of her betrayal. But I wasn't defeated. I was fueled. The heartbreak would not paralyze me. It would sharpen me. I would confront Derek, I would reclaim the shop, and I would ensure that Dad's dream survived intact. As I disappeared into the misty streets, Portland's lights reflecting in puddles at my feet, I whispered to myself, a promise I intended to keep. I'll fight. I'll win. Dad's shop will be mine, no matter what it takes. And with that, the path forward was clear. Justice, truth, and the final confrontation awaited. The storm outside mirrored the one inside me, relentless and unyielding, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it head on. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a sterile weight pressing down from the high ceilings. I gripped the edge of the wooden pew as I walked in, my chest tight with anticipation. The faint hum of Portland's city life outside barely penetrated the solemn quiet within these walls. Every step echoed, a countdown toward the confrontation I had been building toward for weeks. I could feel the key to my father's legacy burning in my pocket, reminding me of why I had come here, to claim what was rightfully mine. Riley sat beside me, a pillar of calm in contrast to the storm inside me. An investigator leaned forward, papers spread across the small table before us, the glow of the fluorescent lights highlighting the details I had painstakingly gathered. Emails, the will, screenshots from Derek's computer. They were pieces of the puzzle that would finally expose his deceit. I took a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of nerves and rain from the morning drizzle, and focused on the moment. Derek sat across the room, his posture rigid, fingers drumming on the table. I noticed his face blanch as my gaze met his, a subtle tremor of fear betraying the confidence he tried to project. Mom sat beside him, hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes downcast, avoiding mine entirely. Her silence was deafening, a confirmation of the third betrayal that had cut deepest. She had sided with him. I felt a pang of sorrow twist inside me, but it was sharp and purposeful now, fueling the resolve that had carried me this far. When the judge called the session to order, my voice shook, but only slightly, as I stood to address the court. "This shop is mine, and you stole from it," I said, each word deliberate, echoing in the cavernous room. The sound of my own voice steadied me, carrying the weight of my father's legacy and every injustice I had endured. I laid out the evidence methodically, the emails showing the deposits, the cryptic offshore loan mentions, and the will confirming my ownership. Each revelation was a blow, a truth that Derek could no longer deny, and the courtroom absorbed it, silent except for the occasional scribble of a note. I watched Derek's face pale further, beads of sweat forming along his hairline. His attempt to appear composed faltered with each document I presented. Mom's refusal to meet my eyes only intensified the hollow victory I felt. The betrayal lingered, a shadow over the moment of triumph, reminding me that reclaiming the shop was not the same as reclaiming my family. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, a mix of elation and grief that was almost physical. Joe sat quietly in the back row, his head nodding ever so slightly as he followed the proceedings. That small gesture was an anchor in the storm, a reminder that some alliances had remained true despite the chaos. The investigator whispered details to Riley, and together they reinforced my arguments, presenting facts with an authority that made Derek's defenses crumble. The judge's eyes shifted between us, scanning the evidence, absorbing the story of betrayal, deceit, and rightful ownership. As I concluded my presentation, my voice gained strength, an undercurrent of righteous indignation threading through the tremor. "The embezzlement totals $75,000 from this shop," I said, letting the numbers resonate in the courtroom. "These funds were stolen from Dad's dream, and I am here to reclaim it." The impact of those words hung in the air, a tangible shift in power that even Derek couldn't ignore. I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight trembling in his hands, the way his eyes darted to Mom for some unspoken reassurance that would never come. I sank back into my seat, letting the adrenaline ebb and the reality of the moment settle over me. Derek slumped slightly, defeated in a way that words could not capture, while Mom's posture remained rigid, her silence louder than any apology could have been. I felt a deep, hollow ache. Justice had been served, yet the emotional cost was undeniable. The shop was mine, yes, but the familial bond I had once taken for granted was irreparably fractured. Outside, the Portland City buzz continued, indifferent to the drama within the courtroom. The rain had returned, tapping against the windows in a rhythmic reminder of the storm I had endured and weathered. Each droplet mirrored the tears I had swallowed, the nights of planning, the hours of stealth and investigation, the moments of heartbreak. I had fought for Dad's shop and I had won, but the victory was tinged with the realization that some losses could never be recovered. I glanced at Riley, gratitude and relief mingling in my chest. "Thank you," I murmured, the words soft but full of meaning. She gave a brief nod, her own expression reflecting the gravity of the moment. Then from the back, a quiet nod from Joe reminded me that even in the wake of betrayal and loss, loyalty and support could endure. It was a small comfort, but an important one. As the judge prepared to deliver the final ruling, I felt the weight of every decision I had made, every step I had taken, crystallize into this moment. The legal battle had been fierce, emotionally taxing, yet necessary. I had proven not just to the court, but to myself, that I was capable of defending my father's legacy against deceit and greed. The confirmation of ownership was imminent, a tangible resolution to the nightmare that Derek, and, to a lesser extent, Mom had created. Even as relief began to wash over me, the bitterness lingered. The shop's doors, its smells, the quiet clatter of cups and the hum of the roaster, it was all mine to protect now. But the familial warmth I had once associated with it was gone. Mom's betrayal had burned that bridge, and no legal victory could restore it. I clenched my fists under the table, the determination in them a promise that I would guard this shop, this legacy, against anyone who dared threaten it again. Finally, the judge's gavel fell, the echo resonating like a final seal of fate. Ownership was confirmed. I had won. Relief, pride, and sorrow blended into a complex, almost unbearable emotion. I had reclaimed what was stolen, but at a cost that would linger far beyond this room. As we left the courthouse, Portland's cityscape sprawled before me, wet streets glinting under streetlights, the rain finally easing. I inhaled the crisp night air, letting it fill my lungs with the promise of new beginnings. Dad's shop was back in my hands, but I was acutely aware that some parts of my past, some betrayals, would never be mended. And yet, in that duality of triumph and sorrow, I found clarity. The fight was over, the justice served, and the future, my future, began now. The morning light filtered softly through the cafe windows, dust motes dancing like tiny sparks in the early Portland sun. Latte Haven felt different today, quieter, lighter, but still heavy with memories. The court had ruled. Derek was to repay every penny he had embezzled, and the shop was officially mine. It was a victory, one I had fought for through sleepless nights, clandestine investigations, and painful confrontations. Yet as I stood behind the counter, inhaling the familiar scent of roasted beans, triumph was tangled with an ache I hadn't expected, the absence of my mother's support. I ran my fingers across the polished surface of the counter, tracing the scratches and dents that bore witness to years of Dad's care. The shop felt alive in a way it hadn't since he passed, the hum of the espresso machine and the soft drip of the coffee maker like an echo of his presence. I moved through the space systematically, cleaning and organizing, trying to reconcile the sense of victory with the emptiness beside me. Every table I wiped and every chair I straightened was a step toward reclaiming not just the shop, but the memory of my father's dreams. As I approached the old roaster in the corner, something caught my eye, a slight bulge between the metal and the brick wall behind it. Curiosity piqued. I leaned closer, and my fingers found a small envelope, yellowed with age. My heart thudded as I carefully slid it out. The handwriting was unmistakable, Dad's familiar loops and curls. I unfolded the paper, and the words hit me like a warm embrace. Maya, you're this place's soul. I sank onto the stool in front of the roaster, letting the letter rest in my hands. A flood of memories surged. The sound of Dad laughing as he taught me to pull the perfect espresso shot, the smell of cinnamon and cocoa wafting from the bakery section, the gentle warmth of his presence that had once filled this room. The shop was more than bricks and beans. It was a living testament to him, and somehow, through all the chaos and betrayal, I had preserved it. My fingers traced the lines of the letter again, grounding me in the knowledge that Dad's spirit still lingered here, guiding me, cheering me on silently. I hung our old photo on the wall near the counter, the frame slightly crooked but perfectly imperfect, much like the shop itself. It showed Dad, smiling with his arm around me, the two of us covered in flour and coffee stains from some long-ago baking disaster. The sight was comforting, yet bitter, a reminder of what I had lost. I realized that victory had a cost. Mom had chosen a different path, and her absence in that moment was as sharp as any courtroom verdict. My phone buzzed lightly, drawing my attention. It was a text from her. "I'm sorry, you chose this," it read. I stared at the screen, a lump forming in my throat. It was a hollow apology, a text instead of a conversation, a final acknowledgement that our relationship was fractured beyond repair. My chest tightened as I typed nothing in response, letting the silence speak instead. Mom had made her choice, aligning herself with Derek even after the truth had been laid bare. I felt the sting of that decision, but I also felt the unyielding strength of having fought for what mattered, having reclaimed Dad's shop, his dream, and a piece of my own identity. The morning passed with quiet diligence. I swept the floor, wiped down the tables, and restock the shelves, each task both routine and sacred. The roaster gleamed under the soft light, its brass panels reflecting the dawn in a way that made it feel almost alive. I poured myself a cup of coffee, inhaling its familiar aroma, letting the bitter warmth fill me from the inside out. In that moment, I understood that saving Latte Haven was more than a legal victory. It was a reclamation of love, legacy, and resilience. Derek's downfall was certain. The court had ordered him to repay the $75,000, and further probes were underway to ensure he faced consequences for his betrayal. The thought of him facing justice brought a grim satisfaction, but it did little to heal the empty spaces left by Mom's complicity. She remained with him, untouched by remorse, leaving me to reconcile my triumph with an enduring sense of loneliness. Would she ever truly regret the choices she had made? The question lingered, unanswered, like the final note of a song that echoes long after the music has stopped. I wandered through the shop, touching the countertops and the espresso machine, listening to the faint hiss of steam, the drip of coffee into waiting cups. Each sound was a connection to Dad, a reminder that despite the betrayals, the shop's heart beat on. I imagined him here, smiling at my determination, proud that I had preserved what he had built. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it was also invigorating, a challenge I was ready to embrace. By midday, the first customers of the new day began to trickle in. Their greetings, the sound of orders being placed, and the clatter of cups on saucers filled the space with a vibrant energy that reminded me why I fought so fiercely. Latte Haven was alive again, not just as a business, but as a sanctuary, a testament to dedication, family, and the legacy of someone who had believed in me. I returned to the roaster once more, placing Dad's letter carefully in a small, safe compartment nearby, a secret treasure that I could revisit whenever the weight of the world pressed down too heavily. I glanced at the photo on the wall, the shop around me, and the faint gleam of sunlight on polished wood, and I allowed myself a moment to breathe. I had saved Dad's dream, and in doing so, I had proven my own resilience. In the soft dawn light, I made a silent promise to myself and to him. No matter the cost, I would protect this place, nurture it, and keep his spirit alive in every cup poured, every pastry baked, and every conversation held over the warm glow of coffee steam. Latte Haven had survived, and through it so had I, even if some pieces of family would never return. The morning sun poured through the wide windows of Latte Haven, spilling golden light across the polished counters and casting long, warm shadows on the floor. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans swirled around me, a comforting reminder of everything I had fought for. The shop was alive again, bustling softly with the murmur of early customers, clinking cups, and the hiss of the espresso machine. And yet, despite the familiar hum, a hollow ache lingered in the space Mom had once filled. Her absence was a weight I felt pressing against my chest with every smile I returned, every latte I poured. I turned the key Dad had given me in the lock of the old safe tucked in the storage room. Its metallic click echoed in the quiet space, sending a shiver down my spine. Opening it, I found Dad's notebook, a worn leather-bound journal with pages yellowed and corners softened by years of dreams, sketches, and notes. My hands trembled as I traced the cover, feeling the pulse of his ambition still alive in the words he had left behind. Each page told stories of new recipes, community events, and even plans for opening another branch of Latte Haven, visions that stretched beyond the walls I now stood in. Hope stirred within me, fragile but persistent. I could see possibilities again, paths where the shop could grow, thrive, and become more than it had ever been. Dad's passion seemed to hum from the pages, infusing me with courage and determination. I realized that preserving his dream wasn't just about reclaiming what had been lost. It was about building something new, honoring him by moving forward with purpose. Flipping through the notebook, one final note caught my eye, written in his unmistakable handwriting. "Maya, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting." I paused, letting the words sink in. They weren't just instructions, they were a reminder of balance, of carrying the past without letting it dominate the present. Could I forgive Mom? Could I let go of the betrayal that had carved such deep wounds in my heart? The words echoed in the quiet room, a haunting reflection that refused easy answers. Her silence had cut deeper than any argument, her choices sharper than any act of deception. And yet, here I was, holding a tangible piece of my father's hope, a beacon that demanded I keep moving forward. I wandered back through the shop, setting the notebook carefully on the counter where it could be seen but safe, a bridge between the past and the future. The early customers' laughter and conversation filled the air, grounding me in the present, while shadows of old pain lingered at the edges. I poured a cup of coffee for myself, the rich aroma strong in my hands, letting the warmth seep into my palms and somehow into my resolve. Latte Haven had survived. I had survived, and the possibilities for what could come next were suddenly real, tangible, and within reach. Even so, the question remained. Could I ever truly forgive Mom for walking away, for choosing silence over honesty, for leaving me to face the storm alone? Her absence echoed louder than any words she might have spoken, a haunting reminder that some wounds are slow to heal, even in the presence of victory. I stared out the window at Portland's morning bustle, the city waking up around me, and wondered how to move forward carrying both triumph and heartbreak. Dad's notebook lay open before me, filled with dreams I could now make my own. Each page was a challenge, a call to action, and a testament to resilience. I traced his handwriting again, feeling a strange comfort in the permanence of ink and paper, in the legacy he had left for me to protect. I realized that the fight had never been just about money or a shop. It had been about identity, memory, and the courage to stand for what truly mattered. As the morning wore on, Latte Haven became a sanctuary once more. The espresso machine hissed, milk steamed into perfect froth, and the familiar chatter of patrons reminded me that life continued, even after betrayal. The shop thrummed with energy, but in its rhythm, I could still sense the lingering weight of family fractures, the gaps left unhealed. I carried both the pain and the hope within me, understanding that they were inseparable, part of the story I would now continue to write. I took a deep breath, letting the aroma of coffee and the soft hum of the shop fill me, and made a silent promise to myself, to honor Dad's dream, to grow this place beyond what anyone could imagine, and to face the future with courage, even if forgiveness for Mom remained uncertain. Some questions, I realized, didn't have immediate answers. Some scars were a reminder that triumph often comes with loss, that love and betrayal can coexist in a single moment, and that moving forward sometimes meant carrying both simultaneously. Latte Haven, my father's dream, my legacy, this was mine. And yet, as I looked at the notebook one last time before tucking it safely back in the lockbox, the haunting question remained. How would I move forward carrying both the light of hope and the shadow of betrayal? I didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time in months, I felt ready to begin the journey. If you've ever faced betrayal, how did you move on? Like, comment, and subscribe to hear more stories of fighting back.